first video with this new hairstyle. Yes, I'm shirtless, but just listen. So recently I've been doing some thinking, and my passion as of now, looking into history and how it seemingly is so bound to change, yet always has a rudimentary, fundamental variable, and it's that it never changes. History is always going to be the same. It repeats itself over and over and over again. Now, with different structure, sure, but ironically enough, the integrity, the rudimentary elements, they still hold, just in different forms as we know it. Now, that put aside, what about World War II? This time, what if Turkey joined? What if Turkey joined? The Axis, man. They were already bound to ultimate destruction and being sandwiched by the Soviets and like the what was it? The anchor and the hammer or something like that. And by the Allies coming west, being sandwiched between the two, having Berlin being split into 4 occupation zones, I believe. Now, let's take a step back. People oftentimes misconstrue the idea, even the ideology that goes behind what genuinely caused the Nazis such trouble. Because if they were destined for failure, which, in my faith in Islam we do, because, what they had against the Jews and Zionists, whatever, then more likely than not, had the Germans won, they would have ruled the world and the Zionists wouldn't have existed, Israel wouldn't have existed, yada, yada, yada. The prophecy would, by no means am I prophesizing myself, but perhaps it wouldn't be the same as we would see today, and everything is just according to Allah, for indeed He is the best of planners. Now, that aside, right, the Germans, it's not about what went wrong, everything that went wrong for the Axis. Sure, Dunkirk, 400,000 Allied, British, and I think some French soldiers just escaped, severely bolstering morale. Getting to see your son, father, brother, husband come back home, that's something that you just want to see. Now, what if Hitler, he didn't turn a blind eye there, and he decided to run his tanks and bulldoze through those marshes and forests, wherever Dunkirk, to get to Dunkirk was, and absolutely obliterate the place, and, mostly focus his ambitions and resources on taking them hostage, as providing a very, very high level of morality, moral taking, kind of a moral blood-sucking variable coming in here, because the public would outcry, and that would not be able to be contained, especially in Britain. They would not be okay with the Germans having them. So Winston Churchill, abundantly so, he would have his reputation faltered more than ever than before, and he would be undermined too, maybe even deposed, because he was a very, very stubborn man, stubborn enough where he even starved and killed millions of Indians, Bangladeshi, whatever, the Raj, whenever they revolted, rightfully so, because they were treated as subhumans. And this is even cited by the man himself, Winston Churchill, as describing the Indians as subhuman. Now, moving on, Dunkirk is an absolute buffoonery of a failure for the Allies, and a huge, unexpected success for the Nazis, or the Axis Germans, whatever. And Vichy France becomes a thing. Sooner or later, France capitulates, like usual. Consolidation occurs. Northern France, the coastal line of Western France reaching until Spain. Vichy France is still established, and that goes on. And Italy does not botch against the the Greece, as they fought that battle with ferocity, as they are good, as comparable as they are to staying loyal to one side. Let's just say that that didn't go too well. Same thing with the Battle of Greece. So, anyways, moving on. They lost, long story short. Now, what if that doesn't happen? Forget even Dunkirk. Like, let's just, for argument's sake, say Dunkirk, right? Didn't Dunkirk still happen the way it did in real life? 1940s, whatever it was, 1941, 42. I don't remember the exact date, but let's just say that the Italians were not in a strategic, absolute failure for the Axis. Let's say that the least they could do was take Greece, right? Or cause Greece a defeat. Excuse me. Which was expected, to be frank, by even Mussolini himself and Adolf Hitler. They didn't just go there expecting. I mean, come on, it was Italy. That's the problem. Unfortunately, it was Italy. Now, let's say that's not the case. Let's say that they weren't such a clown, a circus, freak show, and they actually got their shit together and they got the place. Well, now you don't have Hitler frantically sending troops to help a limping Italy that somehow couldn't stop a mouse, even though it portrayed itself as a lion in the face of a smaller threat. And they don't have to worry about consolidating in the Balkans. Italians are actually somewhat useful as an ally towards the Axis, or an Axis member, not to be confused between the Allies and Axis. Hitler could probably have launched Barbarossa a lot sooner and launch it as expected, not delay, correct? Then what? The harsh winter, the coldest, most killer blow to the Germans and Axis, right, was the winter. In fact, I believe there was a report, yes, I got this from my band teacher in 8th grade, but the Axis German members, they were so hungry they started eating the leather off their shoes. Of course, supply lines, they thinned, but, after all, it was the deadly cold. I think all historians with credibility could say that. Yes, the Soviets were kind of the momentum bolster, but the cold is what indefinitely exposed the one thing that could actually defeat the German blitzkrieg, and it was, well, the weather. You can't really have tanks moving in frozen temperatures. Well, the engine is, ice at this point. Frozen metal can't really move that well. Nor can people even function at at the same rate. They're even more worse off. Now, just imagine that you crippled your supply lines. You crippled literally everything leading up to your high command. Nothing much you could do with the cold. So, yeah. Now here comes the Neo-Ottomans. This time, Turkey. Stalin is as incapable of a listener or reluctant to listening to the Allies as he was in this timeline, and the Germans are even more secretive through sending in German high command and through the eventuality of meeting up with the Turkish, sending supply, troops, ammunition, whatever, again secretly. And when the British Allies question such an act in war, they deny whatever, it's undercover. They can't prove it to the Soviets that they're going to invade. However, fate comes calling, and the Neo-Entente order arrives. This time with the Turkish, German, and Japanese. Yes, Italy, you are pretty incompetent. We're using you for manpower. Okay, fine. You know what? Let's call it the 4-pact, the quad-pact, not the tri-pact. Italy, I'll give you a chance here. So yes, Turkey is definitely not as developed. That is something historians admit, that they are not as developed as the Germans are. I mean, to be frank, really nobody is. But now imagine allying yourself in as strategic of a geopolitical situation you are in right now. Yeah, pretty sure the Germans wouldn't even reject Like, there's no world I can imagine where the Germans would look past that, and they, to be quite frank, they would accept any conditional or unconditional alliance within a blink of an eye. I mean, come on, you've got literally a country that controls the Bosphorus Strait and the entrance for which the Black Sea, and leading up to the Caucasus. You couldn't ask for a better route and manpower, even even if somehow that's like the most Turkey could give. Then again, you still have entrance there. You don't have to cross through whereas the area in the Balkans and expand eastward. Now you can just go straight from the Turkish mountains that borders Armenia and modern day exclave of Azerbaijan. So all in all, long story short, if let's just say Dunkirk still is how it went in real life, Italy is an intellectual buffoon, and they are as competent as they are loyal. Even then, their manpower could be proven useful towards the Germans, and so could the Turkish, except there's a reignited sense of unity, especially between the Germans and the Turkish. See, in real life, Adolf Hitler addresses the Aryans. That's a foregone conclusion. They're the superior race. But he puts a lot of emphasis and respect towards the Turkish, not labeling them as the outer caste, such as, I don't know, the Africans, Indians. I don't quite remember. But long story short, the Turkish, they matter. And he is someone, they are someone he is deeply in awe of. I mean, after all, he did serve with and alongside them, whom he considered his brothers in World War I as a soldier. So, in a realistic scenario, the Germans were within eyesight of the outer banks or the top pillars of Moscow. They can literally see it, I don't know, about 9 to 12 miles, 12 to 15 kilometers away, something like that, 15 to 18 kilometers, I don't know. But they were basically, in essence, a stone's throw away, metaphorically. But now with Turkey in there, Hitler wouldn't have to, even if he did spread, because his forces in a three-pronged attack, people often critique him for doing so, and they said, okay, if you just stop screwing around in Leningrad and Stalingrad, and you just focus directly on Moscow, then you would have taken high command. And I completely agree with that, even in real time. And perhaps the Soviets would have capitulated faster, and because now with your capital under your enemies, your opponent's control, things tend to not go so great, especially for the populace, once they figure that part out elsewhere. Forget the ones within the capital. That's a foregone conclusion. Now, of course, all the repercussions that come alongside that, general collapse or capitulation of Soviet communist high command, alongside other states now having the audacity to declare independence, right? Like another revolution, this time anti-Bolshevik. And more than anything, you see neo-Ottoman flags being put against a country that once pummeled and pummeled and pummeled them into quite literally oblivion, to where they only held Thrace, even as they were still an empire until the end of World War I. We all know how that went. So yeah, in essence, I believe that the world would have been a very, very different place than we have today. And even if the World War, like, let's just say the Soviets collapsing, that probably would have been a foregone conclusion with all the ferocity. I mean, now under a neo-Entente pact or a coalition or alliance, whatever you want to call it, the morale and revenge of the people serving under the banner of the Axis would be highly, highly heightened. I mean, you are a bloodthirsty monster risen from the ashes of what we now call the terrible World War I, Great War. And yeah, you just want to get back at those who absolutely obliterated your rights as people, took your land from you, and etc., etc. basically finishing the jobs which your ancestors couldn't before, or even the people serving. Adolf Hitler, yes, he was a middle-aged man, but he was a very young man. I believe he was a teenager when serving, or in his early 20s when serving in World War One. Now, that aside, that is my hypothesis. That is what I think would unfold in this hypothetical scenario had Turkey joined in a strategic time. Everything is about strategy with Turkey. It's geopolitical standpoint, right? And its foothold into quite literally the Mediterranean. Not to mention how it could very firmly also help Italy out in the Balkans. Yes, Italy, you are going to catch as many strays today with me on camera as you have switched sides. Perhaps I haven't given you enough strays to catch, but anyways, that pretty much wraps it up.